Welcome to Maine, we're stretched to the bone. Prices keep rising, the paycheck stays prone. Inflation keeps knocking, won't leave us alone. They're selling the lie, groceries climbing, the gas tank is low. The bill's hitting harder than snow, but silence still blankets the truth. Where does it go? They're selling the lie. Housing is gridlocked from Portland to the county. Workers commute far past what feels soundly. Talk of solution comes yearly, not loudly. They're selling the lie.
Welcome to the Muddy Waters Podcast, where Mainers tell their stories, unfiltered.
Good afternoon. Good morning. Oh, no, we are good afternoon. Jeez, look at me. Good afternoon, Maine. This is Chuck Ellis, and you're watching the Muddy Waters Podcast. As you all know, I say every single time, the Muddy Waters Podcast exists to help the people of Maine better understand what's going on in our state. Unfortunately, the mainstream media has become a propaganda arm, or as Aaron Chadbourne put it when he was on, it always has been a propaganda arm of the Democrat Party. It's just become a lot more obvious that that's what's going on. And yet there are so many people that don't know that. And in addition to it being a propaganda arm, one of the biggest disappointments of the mainstream media is it doesn't do its primary job is letting people know what's going on in the world around them, specifically what's going on in your backyard versus what's happening in Washington, D.C., which is where so much of the focus in Republican circles and other in Democrat circles as well, it was focused on what's happening in Washington, D.C., where some of the most consequential decisions that directly impact your life, as we saw during the COVID days, are actually determined locally by the local legislature, and even more than that, by your city government, town and city governments. And so we try to, talk about what's happening here in Maine, and as close to home as possible. And so we do that through interviewing people, both candidates and other people from around the state on what's going on in our state. And today, once again, we have a candidate for House District 64 in Waterville with us, Shawn Packard. Thanks for joining us, Shawn.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's such a great opportunity to be able to get out there and speak to the people. And have them hear what the beliefs are from the candidate who is going to represent them, hopefully. So,
yeah, that's the idea. Is again, I think there's too much of a divide, and people are not focused enough on the right things, as I kind of said in my perennially repeated monologue. And so obviously part of the goal between interviewing candidates is not only to promote the conservative candidates who have common sense policies. I'll interview non-conservative candidates as well, but also to let people know who you are, and the ideas that you have for how to fix our state, right? Because I think everybody, whether you're Democrat or Republican or independent, everybody looks at what's going on and says there's a problem. The Democrats primarily say that the problem is that we're not spending enough and we're not taxing enough, and Donald Trump, and that's really all the Democrats seem to have to say. Yeah. Unfortunately, they don't take much ownership for the fact that Maine is ranked in the bottom 5 among the other states that are all under the governance of the Trump administration, actually, and yet Maine is doing worse. So even if you wanted to make the argument, which I think it's not a great argument, that Donald Trump is part of the problem, why are we ranked so poorly out of all the other 50 states that have to deal with Donald Trump's policies? And so it's just the Democrats know that if they ran on their own record, they would lose. And so instead, they've got to run on not being Trump.
Mm-hmm. And it's multifaceted, right? We're not just on the bottom for, we're at the bottom for our education. We're the highest ranking for our taxes, which isn't at the bottom, in other words, of where we should be at. But we're at the worst that we can possibly be at. We have no economic growth, no jobs that will be formed in this year alone. This is the worst state that our state has ever been in, right? And obviously we've seen why the past 8 years have been, under Janet Mills. But even beyond that, we always have to look towards a future. And if we were under the theoretical oligarchy of Janet Mills that we were under, what does that future look like? And it was dire. So we have to change things around. And I think that we've seen a lot of good things from candidates around the state. Ones for, governor that we had before with the primary, and now we get to look forward to whatever will come in November, right? But either way, I think that there's some good progress to be had over what we had before, for sure.
Yeah, 100%. It's kind of funny you mentioned like how bad things are, and we're at the worst state, the place that we've been in as a state. I can think of some of the things that a lot of the Republican gubernatorial candidates said. One of the things that Owen McCarthy made a comment on was basically that we want Maine not to be a vacation spot for the wealthy, but the people who basically, I can't remember exactly how he put it, but to be a place where people can grow up, raise a family, and be able to afford to do so. But Bobby Charles, when he first started running, I think he's kind of backed away from this rhetoric, not necessarily like for any particular reason. I don't think it's just like but I very much remember him saying it early on, and I don't think he says it exactly this way. He says the same thing, just in a different way. But the word that he used was peril. We are in peril. Yeah. And it's like, that is the reality is the situation is dire. We need different leadership in Augusta. I think I was looking at something really interesting, and I haven't had a chance to dive into it yet. But I was looking at some report that was showing that adjusted for, income, Mississippi is like the number 2 state in the nation in terms of education. You know what's number 1 on that chart? It was Massachusetts, which is run by Democrats, right? Yep. And yet they seem to be doing better adjusted for income, far better than the state of Maine, which is near the bottom, even in that chart. And so what's really interesting is like this isn't even necessarily a Democrat Republican only thing. It's like the Maine Democrats are bad for Democrats. They're doing bad against the other Democrat run states.
And that brings up a really good point too, which is that you're right. It's worse than we've seen across the board, but it's because here in Maine, we've decided to just make this a Republican and Democrat issue, and we're at war. Mm-hmm. We see it across the nation for sure. And the media is making that the number one thing because people like to see the division. But, in the state of Maine, it's our education systems that get it the most. And you see it with what's happened with our school board meetings, right? Yeah. That divide is the center point for everything that they're focused on. And where has their focus shifted from? The education, the actual, purpose for what they're supposed to be delivering as results. And so that's not a Republican issue. That's not a Democrat issue. But from a conservative standpoint and like common sense standpoint, I should say, we push towards actual solutions and finding ways to fix this. And that is that for the past however long your school board has been one-sided, we need to start changing some things up, and that starts with local elections, of course, and trying to push them to actually have an education-focused mindset and critical thinking skills. And
you gotta be careful how you define critical thinking. They say that they're focused on critical thinking.
So for me, right, I very well define it by saying remove standardized testing and have retention-based teaching and retention-based testing, right? So you still have your tests for each child, but now you're also able to look at the teachers too and say like, okay, well, this, because it isn't one-sided. Right now it is. Like kids can just get, 25% of the answers right just by guessing. But that doesn't actually... It doesn't give a basis for their understanding, and it also doesn't give a basis for what the teacher taught. And did they teach them in a way that allows the child to understand it? And so now, if there's no written material necessarily to ABCD it, now you can look at, did they retain that information through a thought process? And obviously, everybody learns differently, and that's what the classroom method is for you to learn that material. But when it comes to that test time, it's not going to be just fill in the blank here. You have to write out what your response is based on what you actually learned, which is very important and very different than what we have.
Interesting. Yeah, that's definitely another approach. I am interested in anything that's going to increase our students' like results. Like I think, like many Mainers, I am more and more frustrated by the increases in taxes that are putting an undue burden on our aging population, the people who largely built this state, built the economy that used to exist, that the Democrats are trying to destroy. I feel like, I don't know, sometimes I want to like explain some things. Like I am not, like, when I entered into politics, this was like 4 years ago, I was an unenrolled. I had no love. So it's kind of interesting. If I was unenrolled, then I ran as a Republican. Why? Right? The truth is I largely voted for Republicans because when I looked at the values that they claim to represent, the Republicans most closely aligned with my views and values. And I had some different ways of looking at things, I think, than I think traditional Republicans sometimes do. And so I like probed the party and I was like, am I welcome? And they're like, yeah, you're welcome, and so I'm like, okay, well, I guess I can work within this. But I say this because I didn't come at this with a partisan perspective. I am a Christian first and foremost. I am a follower of Jesus, and his kingdom is not of this world. Now, that doesn't mean that Christians shouldn't engage. I think some of the most profound impact of people in our world's history were Christians seeking to live out what they believe to be the truth of the gospel through every aspect of their life, most prominent of which is probably William Wilberforce, who ended the slave trade in the British Empire. He wasn't alone. He had help, but he was the primary force behind that action, and he did it from biblical and Christian convictions that drove him, and he dedicated his life to it. And so it is something that I think Christians should be a part of, but that's a whole nother story. But that's the first and foremost for me. It's not the Republican Party, and I will be a Republican forever in perpetuity. I've never been a company man. And so I say all this to say that, like, I don't lightly say the Democrats. And frequently when I'm talking about the Democrats, I like to point out that there's a big difference between the Democrat voters and the Democrats in elected office. I think a lot of Democrat voters are people who are somewhat uninformed. They've been given speaking points by the Democrat Party, but they ultimately want to see the world be a better place. They're not looking for centralized power and control. That's not what they necessarily want. But they've bought into the idea that the Democrat Party is doing good things. Now, the people who are in elected office for the Democrats, on the other hand, I think some of them are idealists and really believe stuff. But I think a lot of them, it's really just about advancing the agenda of the party, and it's about power and control. There are arguments that some people on the right are the same, so I'm not going to say that that's not true. I feel like it's important to make this distinction because, like, when I say the Democrats, I'm saying this like reluctantly. I don't like being in the Democrats versus the Republicans. You got to vote for every Republican. I even ask myself, every Republican, are they all better than the Democrats that oppose them? And the short version is almost always. It's gotten to the point where the Democrats are on the wrong side of all the like 80-20 issues. And all the issues that there is an obvious right side to, they're on the wrong side, and they're digging in their heels. And like a simple one that's just so obvious, like boys should not. People are getting tired of it, and I'm sorry if you're tired of it, but boys being in women's sports, like, it's just so obvious. And I remember when it first came out, there was somebody in an activist focused more on medical freedom, who basically said that don't talk about that. It's not gonna be an issue that long, because they were operating from an assumption that the Democrats would at some point in the future realize this is a losing issue for us. We'll back off on it. They haven't done that. And they continue to push that agenda. And so anyway, this is one of the many examples, though, where they're on the wrong side of history, and they're not actually. Sometimes I feel bad for Democrat voters, right? Because they trust these people, and I think a lot of them are like, why are we not voting in favor of the common sense policy.
And for me, that goes back to the education, right? You know, if you have Democrats that are in control of the whole state at this point, right, then that affects our education system.
Yep.
And right now, you're not teaching civics, you're not teaching home economics, you're not having shop classes, like the things that at the end of the day that we might all agree upon are good things for our kids. Dare I say, even the Democrat voter would agree upon that are just good things. The problem is that those people that are in control are de facto making decisions that are kind of against that 80-20, and that's the problem. And at the end of the day, they are the future of us. And if they were taught the same ways for the past 50 years to do certain things one way, they're going to grow up that way. And so while we can try to fix things right now, what we're not looking to do is fix the future. And the future generations will just grow up doing the same things that we're trying to fix right now. And it's perpetual. We'll never catch up unless we get ahead of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the danger and that's the concern, especially here in Maine. Other parts of the country is a different story, but here in Maine, I think one of the most substantial ways to impact a culture is through education, right? Is because of the captive audience that you have there, because of the ways in which you can train kids. And if anybody's not yet read, not 1984, great book, but that's not where we're going, but Brave New World. Both of these stories actually deal with social conditioning and the way in which the government, through either pleasure or a combination of pleasure and fear, I should say, or fear itself. Like 1984 is more fear-based. I would say Brave New World is a combination of fear and pleasure. They socially condition people to behave in the way in which they want people to behave. And so many people have fallen into that. And I think that's one of the most challenging things. This is what I spend my days thinking about right now, because like I'm not engaged in politics because it gives me, the thrills or frills or whatever. I'm here because I actually want to positively impact our state. That's why I'm doing this, right? That's why you're doing this. Yeah. And I sit here and I look at the demographics, I look at the way people vote, and I wonder, like, how do we get through to people? How do we help people see? And when we talk about the social conditioning, they've done such a good job at conditioning their own people to decide that, and some people on our side do this as well, that you need to judge people through the lens of what do they think about Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. And if they voted for Donald Trump ever, you can't trust them. This is what the Democrats push. On the other side, there are people who say, well, on the Republican side, there are problems. What I'm fond of saying is that like all the problems that exist on the Democrat Party exist to a degree in the Republican Party. A lot of the power games, a lot of the ways in which we misclassify people, I think, and judge people, and a variety of other things. But it's just much more pronounced on the left, like to the point where it's like so toxic that's just like complete on the left. Whereas there are some instances on the right. But with the social conditioning, they've done such a good job at conditioning their people. Like, how do we get through to them? Because if you hear I'm a Republican, now they're just like, oh, you must be a Trump lover. And therefore you are untrustworthy in all things. Yeah. And I think it's just hard to counteract that. Mm-hmm. And, one of the things that differentiates, I think, the Democrats from the Republicans as well, and the Democrats are so good at this, is they don't really message to their own people. The Republicans, for whatever reason, we just bang the drum and try to get Republicans all riled up. Right. And we do it. And Republicans show up to vote and lose because we didn't gain enough people over to our side, because we're preaching essentially to the choir and expecting that people who are not in the choir will listen. Whereas the Democrats, they message to the middle and to the right. Their actual goal is, how can we discourage Republicans from showing up to vote for their guy? They've, and we sometimes help them out. Like, there are people out there that are like, I'm not going to vote for Bobby Charles or whatever because I don't think he was the best one. It's like, you know how ridiculously silly that is? I mean, Rick Bennett is not an option. Hannah Pingree is not an option. If you want to go through why, give me a call. Like, I'd love to chat about it, but they're not options. Bobby Charles is the option of the gubernatorial race. And I mean, it's the difference between 8 more years of Janet Mills and a conservative.
Mm-hmm.
May not be your favorite guy, but like, this is part of this is what they do. Now, some of it we do it to ourselves, but I think a lot of it is the other side does it too. They try to discourage us and be like, if your candidate's not perfect, you shouldn't show up to vote. And their candidates are like people like Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, and Kamala Harris. They don't have a problem showing up and voting for some of the worst candidates in U.S. history, but somehow their messaging convinces us not to show up, conservatives and independents who are conservative leaning. And part of what I wrestle with, and I'm a problem solver, and so my mind is always at this, and it annoys my wife, is how do we reach those people?
I think it comes down to, I'll be honest when I say this, I guess, is like, we all, like, I don't know. I'm going to say, like, we just need a not Trump version of somebody that they appreciate, but that's a Republican. I think that it all comes down to the national view.
Getting away from
we need
focusing on what's happening in Washington, D.C.
But I mean, we also need somebody that is the next president that kind of appeals to both sides in a way that doesn't make it about sides. When you have a presidential person that everybody's looking at them, mm-hmm. and when that trickles downward, there's never going to be a time where somebody's talking about the state rep that's in Westbrook or you know what I mean. Like, it's just never going to happen unless it's such a big pretentious race that they've raised $150,000 for a little house seat. It's pretty rare,
Right.
It happens, but it's pretty rare. And that's probably, it happens because of the divisiveness between the two sides. Like, but if you got a presidential candidate that kind of nullified that, right? You'd have Democrats that are like, whoa, this guy, like, I don't know what to think of him. And then you'd have Republicans, though, that would also be like, well, I don't know what to think of him. And it's not a bad thing. I think that because as long as at the end of the day, the goal is for what's best for the United States of America, like, I think that's the lost thing is, like, we're fighting for a side, but the side doesn't represent, I feel like, always our best interest all the time. It helps push whatever agenda or idea that they want in that moment. But like you mentioned earlier, your why of what you're doing is because you're a Christian first. That's great. And that's the most important thing. But that being said, that's not every Republican's view.
Definitely not.
And that's a problem if the world represents, Chuck as, a Republican. Well, what happens when the Republicans stray away from what Jesus wants and taught? And like,
that's why I say I'm not a company man.
Yeah, I get that. But they don't, no matter how many times you say that, they're not going to hear that.
This Republican.
Correct. So at what, we just need somebody who understands that, but on both sides, because there are Democrats that want specific things that are not what the people want. And so it's like how you need to approach it from what the best interest of the United States of America is, rather than just the best interest of a party. Because at the end of the day, they're going to go against each other. How many times as Republicans have you said, no matter who it is, whether it's, Trump or whether it's, you look back in history and you're like, that was really stupid. That was just really, I wouldn't do that. And when we all say it, and they're like, I told you so. Like, and like at the end of the day, though, that they've had the same thing happen where they're like, all for the guy, ready to, march in giant parades. And then when they do something that they don't believe, they're like, ooh, I don't know. I wouldn't have done that. And the difference is that they deliver that message of, ooh, I wouldn't do that differently than we do. And then they still support that person. I mean, we all see how far people went for Graham Plattner. I mean, it was like the next thing and then the next thing and the next thing. And everybody said, well, none of it's really substantial or none of it's real. Like, we don't really know. They're allegations. And then all of a sudden this thing was legit. And then all those other things before became legit. And
not to illegitimize that situation, but we don't even know. We have an accusation.
Yeah.
In from a legal standpoint, right? Like we believe we're in a country where I'm not saying we shouldn't take these things seriously. Obviously we do, but like we actually don't know the full evidence.
Yeah.
We have claims that she documented this stuff with her therapist prior to him ever running for office. But at this point, we have her claims, right? And so I just want to highlight that they jumped ship from him without necessarily having verified stuff. But there was a ton of stuff. There's plenty of reason. But there's something about the whole nature of how it all happened that seemed far too convenient for a party that had decided that they wanted to move on from their candidate. Or really, if you look at not Mitch McConnell, but Chuck Schumer never really wanted this candidate anyway, and was able to successfully get rid of him. I mean, I think a terrible candidate, and they should have got rid of him. But I think I just want to highlight that, But it took that.
It took that.
I took like what appears to be a very credible rape allegation from a former girlfriend. That's obviously very, very serious. But so was all the other stuff.
No, and that begs to question for, in general. Are parties or is our government candidates vetted, and what does that look like? And I don't know, it just seemed like there was so many problems with that candidate that easily should have been disclosed. And there were also so many times in public he was asked, is there anything else? Did you so opportunity to get ahead of it was always there, and chose not to. And I guess if it were real, maybe you wouldn't want to get ahead of that, because that's it's going to damage you.
I mean, you just not run.
And then there's my larger point, which is again, you probably ought not to run if you have anything like that in your life. Because things since 1997 pretty much. It's out there. We live in a very internet world, and everything you do is out there forever.
Yeah. So, but I think the idea of vetting, right? You talk about this. We were talking about it a little bit off air. I think the vetting process for candidates should be the voters, right? So people at home, this is your job. Now these candidates are out there trying to talk to people they want to talk to, right? Yeah. People in your district, you want to talk to them, right? This is an opportunity for you to ask the questions that are important to you and figure out the character and see what you think of these people. This is what the vetting process is supposed to be.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I was on the Ray Richardson show this morning, and they were talking about the term that was used by some was that the voters are dumb, and dumb is not. I think according in the definition that was given for dumb is basically people who are too lazy to do the work to figure out what's going on in our world and realize where it's coming from. I don't like calling people dumb. Well, I might like it, but I don't think it's wise to publicly call a bunch of people dumb. I do think that there's a lack of concern, and I think accountability being placed on local government officials by the people, because I think we've been socially conditioned into not wanting to be the bad guys, and not wanting to receive social backlash from highlighting real problems in our world.
And then that brings us to sort of also what we did talk about off air, which is just media and media in general, back in the day, you wouldn't have an option to just sit at home and watch your city council meeting. That was the coolest thing in town, and you'd go to your city council meeting. And the reason I bring that up is everybody has a complaint. Well, that their city budget went up, taxes are being raised, and I know that sucks when your taxes go up. But you know what you could have done? Gone to the meeting and spoke your mind and say, I don't think that we should pass this budget because the budget is way too high. If you got 100 people in the room that all don't want you to pass this budget and they friggin' pass it anyway, like, you're probably dumb, you know. And there you go. Like, I think what's lost is that people in the public don't feel like they matter anymore, but they do. And the only reason that they even, like, they've lost that is that people have made choices because that there is no public input. There's tons of city council meetings, there's a ton of school board meetings that happen with nobody there. Nobody even attends, few people. And that's not enough for them to take all that into weight and sway a decision. But if you fill the room, again, it's going to weigh on them a little bit, and it's going to change their mind. I mean, think about, hate them or love them, but think about when Nick had the team of people undressing in there, right? It made national news, right? And it's like, it didn't make that because of who he was, or didn't make that because of party politics. It made it because there were so many people that showed up in that room and tried to make a difference. And that could be made and said for either side of the aisle. But we all feel as the public that it doesn't matter anymore, and that we're not heard. Well, you are the one who put the person there in power. You have every right to be heard. And I dare say that we ought to get back to being heard. It's better than being online and being a little keyboard warrior and typing your thoughts in a comment to a candidate and in their area, saying that whatever it is. Like, it's not helpful anymore. The thing that's helpful is go to your current rep, go to your current state senator, and urge them to do what you want to change. Like, I think talking to the people that are currently in is where it starts, and we got to stop being afraid of them. They're not like, they're our friends, they're our neighbors. Like, we voted for them. Like, now we have to be okay with stepping up and actually, believing in something.
Well, and holding them accountable. And I'm not yawning because the conversation is boring. Apparently I need more sleep at night. Anyway, but yeah, I think holding them accountable is the other piece of it. Like, yes, communicate with them. I've done that a little bit with my rep. I've never gotten an answer that I like. I've gotten a lot of really sophisticated Democrat propaganda, but I think communicating with them is part of that, and you can then use that. I mean, that's what you have to do, right? To, like, if they continue to not do what the people really want, then that's your opportunity to, like, point that out and then try to get somebody else in there. I mean, there's two parts. One, you have to make sure that your voice is heard, and if you're heard but not listened to, and you're on the right side of history, then we use that to help us get the right people in elected office. And I think that's where we need to do a better job of making sure people are aware of the issues that are facing our state, such as the energy crisis.
Oh, exactly. Right? I was going to break it down for you, right? I got 9,000 people in a district. That's what we have pretty much across the state for any kind of rep. And if I put it into perspective for me in my little area in Waterville and Winslow, I have like 4,700 registered voters. Now, obviously, not every single one of them will vote for me. Hope that they do, but I want to earn their vote, and the way that I want to do that, though, is from a level of understanding that the issues that we face are not just right in Waterville; they're everywhere in the state, and we can tackle all of it starting right there in Waterville. There's so many things that can be done that aren't listened to. Again, like, I've seen it locally. I've seen it across the state where your rep just kind of shows up to do the button pressing, and then that's it. Doesn't create any new laws, and then they don't have actually a vision for their area, right? Think about it like this: like, a job of a state representative is to represent the city or town that they live in, and to be a beacon of hope for their voice at the state level. That is the summary of what it is. So they're making policies and making changes that affect the entire state, but it's from the perspective and mindset of the place that they represent. And obviously they have their morals, their virtues, and whatnot to be able to kind of enlightened from. But at the end of the day, I don't know how many people I could name that don't literally ask anybody that they represent. You know, I hear it all the time from people, whether it be in my area or even just outside, where they're like, I call all the time and I don't hear anything back. Like, well, then what's the point of having this person represent you if you have no voice with that person? You should have a voice. So you're essentially a public servant in that regard, and that person should allow you to have a voice, even if it's not the public, or the best opinion of that situation. You're granted that voice, and beyond that, you can have conversations with that person to say, like, well, I know that you want it this way, but I got to vote this way because the majority of people actually maybe believe one thing over the next, or whatever. You're that person. You're the liaison between them and the state, and that isn't accounted for enough, unfortunately. And again, I'm 29. I believe me, before this, I lost all hope in government, right? I'm part of that generation that didn't grow up with civics, that had no understanding of how it worked and really didn't care about it, right? Obviously through foster care and through Paula Page and through, various government entities, I have had a little bit more hope in government. But it's very interesting what the media does to make you believe one thing. It's like such tunnel vision to reality. I think the majority of people across the state think that Paula Page is like the worst human being in the world. He's so mean, and I don't have that perspective of him. Right? He like saved my life, and so I guess. And here's the flip side of that, which is that we have to respect the role. I've had arguments over this before, but it's true. I may not agree with everything that the president does, but at the end of the day, he's the president. I don't go to court and look at the judge and say, hey, Mr. Judge, are you a D or an R? I respect his position of authority, and I give him that due, and I trust that he has the interests best of the people, right, and the jury. Anyway. Yeah, well, you hope, and so at the end of the day, your state reps, your state senators, your U.S. senators, all these things, right? You hope that they also have that same. At the end of the day, just because they may represent a partisan line, they have the best interest of the people. Their voice will help guide the state of Maine. That's what you want. So that's what I intend to do.
Awesome. Well, that's what we need. I think we need candidates who are actually serious about doing research, looking into stuff, and coming to conclusions that make sense for people. One thing that I was fond of saying when I was running was I'm interested in policies that actually work, not that simply sound good. Like, and oftentimes, whether it's, Congress or locally, they name a bill something that sounds positive. But when you look at the end result of it, it's actually net negative, but it sounds good. And it goes back to the way in which they socially condition people, and that's what they're doing. But I think how we win back our state, how we win over common sense and reason, is by engaging with people. You do this in hitting doors, but everybody needs to be talking to their friends and neighbors and whoever they possibly can, and trying to not push them and force them into something, but find a way to try and get to a place of communicate. Okay, this is what you believe, this is what I believe, and why. And you get to have your opportunity to discuss with them, because it's something that's been largely lost in our culture. In order to we have to get the right people, but in order to get the right people have to. It's interesting on the Republican side. We want all Republicans should just vote for all the Republicans because they're Republicans. But when we talk to Democrats, we're like, don't vote the party line. It's kind of an interesting thing.
That's why I was saying it shouldn't be necessarily the lines. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, is the person right for the role? Do they have good and informed policies that will actually help their area or the state of Maine? And are we looking as a society to push forward to a better tomorrow? Because I feel like half the time, if you're a Republican, you want to undo everything that the Democrats did. If you're a Democrat, you want to stop or undo everything that the Republicans have done. And that mindset doesn't push forward. We're just at a standstill, or we're reversing.
Right.
The reality is that we have to look forward to a better tomorrow, because I'll be honest. I mean, I have two kids, 8 and 6, and before kids, I was like, I don't know, are we gonna have kids in this world right now? Like, it's
A lot of people ask those questions.
yes, and you shouldn't have to.
And we do need more kids, so have them is
Yeah.
my answer.
But like,
but it's a valid question, just like in the sense of like this is a tumultuous time, and it's not easy, and
so we have to look always forward, and the way to do that is through our education system, thinking about the people who will be in the future, right? And then we have to also protect our children, the ones who are in difficult, pretentious situations, whether it be in foster care or orphanages or whatever we have across the state of Maine. We need to be there for them and not let them be, dying off. And
sure.
And then obviously from a legislative standpoint, policy standpoint, we need policies that actually push us into tomorrow, not ones that, just undo what the other person did. And then thinking about that too, we can't just be worried about the like simplistic bills of like, yesteryear, when it was like, don't spit on the ground or don't drive barefoot. I think half of these things were, very, very niche and in the moment. And now we have things that we just disregard those. And then I think that leads to society not believing in the system as a reality. But, the bills that we are pushing forth do matter. And we have to let the people be aware of them so they can be informed.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. Sorry, I was distracted. There was a bug that got on the lens.
Oh, no,
like, what's going on with the image? Anyway, so no, we definitely need, again, common sense policies that are necessary, not any of this other nonsense that's happening. Silly fly distracting me. Anyway, it's just, oh man. So I think obviously you talk about education a lot, and I think it's really important, because I do think it is the linchpin to changing the trajectory of the future, because our children are being not educated but indoctrinated by a group of people that are effectively communists at this point. And again, this is where like I don't want to do the Democrat versus a Republican thing, but the Democrat Party is not the Democrat Party that it used to be. They've gone into full scale Bolshevikism and are seeking to wrest the country away from how it was founded into this like socialistic utopia that can't exist. Just if you understand human nature, that it's impossible. But that is the nonsense that they're pushing, and I think they're pushing that in the schools. And so to go back, like one thing that I'm fond of saying, because people have said before that we are that like politics is downstream from culture, is what I sometimes hear, right? And I tend to disagree and say that I think that politics and culture have a symbiotic relationship, and they inform and impact one another. If like you change the political leader and some of the laws, you have shifts in culture. But you can have shifts in culture that cause there to be changes in who's in charge politically, right? And so I think that there is one of the most significant positive ways, or just ways in general, to be able to influence the future of a nation or a country or state, whatever, is the political. Are we teaching our children to be critical free thinkers, or are we basically aggressively, Brave New World style, socially conditioning them to behave the way that we want them to behave, and in a way that makes them easier to control by the global elites? Or are we encouraging them to be free thinkers who are seeking truth and seeking to figure out what actually in practical reality is going to lead to the most human flourishing? That's a question.
Yeah, it's true. We're seeing it where they're conditioned to basically be simpler humans, and the reality is that the mold breakers of the world leaders and best people in business and in whatever it is, they saw the conditioning writing on the wall, and they were able to see through it and change their own trajectory. For the most part, if you look at half of the stories of most of these people that have, shaped the future, whether it's through technology or business, they were able to do so because that they had enough ambition, tenacity, and resilience to what was around them. It's not something that we necessarily didn't give them the cards to do that, right? And so I think that society as a whole, puts people in such a subjective box that unless you're going to break out of that, you pretty much have already had your life written into a certain category. And that's terrible. Like, growing up, I remember hearing it all the time. Like, I guess to really quickly make this a point, it's like we've lost that World War II generation of people who fought for our country, understood what it took, what sacrifice was, what family values and virtues were, and then came back even after that to build a business and build whatever it was in their community, a successful community entirely. And we have lost that because not only did the generations thereafter just kind of silver hand and spoon everything, but more so our society has said that you deserve everything because you're special. And I get that, but we also have to realize that there is no desire to then do anything. And when the reality is that we have to work for what we earn for, and we need to strive to be the best, each of us. And that isn't saying that, geez, well, you're so selfish, you want to be the best. Well, no. What that then every day when I wake up and my feet hit the floor, I am trying to strive to be the best at everything, not just for myself, but for my community, for my family, for Christ. We have I have a desire to do everything I possibly can for everybody around me, to make them happy, to make them live in a world where they don't have to fear about their own thoughts being chastised or the society around them belittling them for whatever they may believe. We're all independent thinkers, and thus we should have the independence to be able to think the way we should. And that's fine. The problem is that when we take that independence and we force it upon our youth, or we force it upon people in our area, we're segregating them from their independence. And that becomes the problem. And that's what we've seen for the past, however many years under one party policy is that happens. And it happens either way. So what are we going to do to be able to break that mold and create a better tomorrow?
And so I think arguments could be made that you've touched on some of this, but one of the areas where I sometimes am a little critical of our own party is like, it's one of these things, like, I don't think it's there now, but at one point earlier this year, or maybe late last year, the Democrat Party had reached like the lowest approval rating like in its history, right? At below 30%, right? And Republicans were like praising this, like Trump destroyed the Democrat Party. They're in free fall. What's interesting, as I noted earlier, they're on the wrong side of all the 80-20 issues, and they haven't changed, which means they understand that negative approval rating doesn't matter if their opponents don't have a great approval rating either. And I looked into this, and I think they were below 30%, and we were right around 35% as Republicans. And so we're not doing much better. And one of the things I think I said earlier, I don't know if it was on the podcast or not, but their messaging is to the middle and to the right to discourage us from getting out and voting for our people, or to convince some of the softer conservatives that the Republican Party is too extreme, even though the views of the Republican Party are literally just American views. Largely at this point, most of the Republican views are in line with Clinton, 90s Democrats, right? I mean, Trump himself, is a 90s Democrat. Most of the Democrats that have come over and started registered as Republicans and started voting Republican are JFK Democrats. And so, anyway, the right isn't radical to begin with. But anyway, the Democrats, their messaging is really targeting conservatives rather than targeting everybody else. Whereas Republicans, we've just been like talking about how bad the Democrat Party is without really giving a clear vision or a great picture of what is the world that we're trying to create. And why is that much more attractive than the false utopian hellscape the Democrats are pushing? So what is it that we're trying to create?
You're right, and that comes to, that's a lot. There's a lot to unpack there, right? Like our messaging in general from the Republican Party is,
and this isn't just local. This is like in mass.
Oh, I know,
this
exactly.
Is from many people within our movement here locally, but also nationally. It's like it's not highlighting one person, right?
That's, I guess, where I'm going to get at, which is that our national message is one thing, and our local message is a different thing, and then our uber local message is a totally different thing. Like it's all different. Like whereas the Democrat Party, for the most part, from a national level to a local level, even an uber local level, it's all pretty much the same. So like the reason that everybody can get on board behind it is like you have a party that pretty much is arm in arm together through thick and thin, and they'll stick through it. Whereas the Republicans, because we're so independent and because we all are liberty minded and wanting what's best for America, we lose track of what that goal is, even though like that is the overall arching goal. I think we all we get in our own heads of what that takes to get there, and you have a different thought of how we're going to get there than I do. And if we're both running and we're both like fairly well known people, then we're going to butt heads. And then you have a national leader who says that that's our goal too, but at the same time does things to totally contradict that. So what are we left to do? I feel like we're left to deal with the local people to say, well, we're not that guy, but we also have the same goal. That's not how it works. So we do need better messaging, better marketing, better understanding of that goal as a whole. I think if we could just have everybody sit down in a room and say like, all right, here are those 80-20 issues, right? Or here's our...
The 80-20 issues are still, they're not even the, I don't know, what was the terminology you were using earlier? There's the what and the how. And so the why. So but they're not even the why. They're part of the how.
Exactly.
Or the what. And so like, so that's where like we got to get at like, what is it about the
why are we running as a Republican?
The vision for America that the Republican Party brings that makes it a better vision than the Democrat Party, right? And so again, it's easy to pick at the Democrat Party and say, well, we're not looking to judge people based on the color of their skin, but rather a society based on I think American exceptionalism is one of the terms, right? Like if you work hard, you're going to be rewarded. I think that's a positive. It's both looking at the negatives of the Democrat Party, but also the positives of the Republican Party. And so things like, but again, if we're always explaining who we are out of the lens of over against who we're running against, I think that puts them in the driver's seat, right? So like our vision of the world, regardless of what they do, right, is one in which people are economically, spiritually, emotionally whole. And how do we, then we can get at the how, right? But like that's part of what we're focused on. We're trying to create a society where people are free to be who they want to be, do what they want to do, where there are consequences for actions. You have freedom, but there are consequences to your actions. If you choose to go, for instance, and get a degree in a field in which we don't need people, you will not have a job. And if you put yourself in a position where you owe a bunch of debt as a result of that, it is not anybody else's responsibility but your own to pay it off. So you have the freedom, but there's also the responsibility. So freedom, responsibility. I think the family unit are some of the things that I think we definitely need for healthy society. We need a environment that strongly encourages healthy families. Anyway, those are just a few that I'll throw out there really quickly. But what is that? I guess the why, as you would have put it. But what is it we're aiming for?
I think you're right on the ball with all those things, right? Like why did we separate entirely to form America? And so you have to look back to that. And I was about to mention earlier in our talk that, I'm running as a Republican not to represent the Republican Party anymore, because I don't think that they have those best interests all the time in mind. I am a Republican to my fundamental core. And I think back to the Republicans that formed the country, the people who freed the slaves, the people who fought for liberty and justice and a understanding of work ethic. And that's the kind of Republican I am, while also understanding that people have the right and liberty to do whatever they want. And that, yes, those things also do and can come with consequences. And so that's where you have to hold people accountable to those issues. And
let's talk about that for just a moment, because holding people accountable, that sounds bad.
Well, it could be, but why is it bad to hold somebody accountable though?
It's not. And that's my point, though.
Okay.
I think we think about it as being a negative thing, hold people accountable.
Sure.
I think some people hear punishment. And while there is an element to that, I remember when I was working in the bank, if we had an employee that was underperforming. I was just
about to bring up a bank.
Right. So we're working in the bank. We have an employee that's underperforming. What do? Well, we put them on a performance improvement plan.
Okay.
We intentionally... I was not part of the process of creating a title, right? Yeah. But the title is really important because the objective is to improve performance. It is a negative thing. It is accountability. It is somebody saying you're not up to snuff. But the end result is to get you up to snuff, not to fire you.
Right.
The goal is not to fire people.
Right.
The goal is to help people become productive, and accountability is just that. It's actually focused on, one, yes, protecting people depending on what type of things are happening. So we do need to protect the innocent, right? And so that, if you want to call that penalty, whatever. But ultimately, it's all really focused on, making sure that people are as healthy and productive as possible. And some of that requires some, we'll call it accountability.
And a positive way of accountability. All right. You have a card through a bank, right? And I have a transaction from a foreign country that I did not pay for. Well, if I didn't pay for it, I will honestly hold the bank accountable that I will have my money protected and that I might get that money back. So accountability isn't always negative.
Right.
There's a positive.
Well, it's negative for the bank.
It is. But from my perspective,
Yeah.
I use the bank. I hope to be protected from the bank, and I'm holding them accountable to their word to protect me.
That's right.
And so that's a positive for me, negative for the bank, whatever. But
it's ultimately positive for them too.
I think so. Yeah, because
it
I'm
helps
a customer.
Protect their reputation in the future, right? Yeah. It's even though yes, there's a cost.
Sure.
There can be a cost associated with accountability, but ultimately accountability should be good for everyone. Making sure that people honor their agreements.
A handshake used to be a contract. Okay. And so we've lost that, where we can't trust other people, or we don't trust ourselves. Yeah. And so now we had to create contracts with written form. And then we needed lawyers to enact those said written forms, because we couldn't even trust it with a piece of paper. They would burn them. They would leave. They would, many different things. So we've kind of kept adding layers to accountability and trust and reliability. But now when we talk about accountability, okay, why is that such a big hot button word for Republicans? And in my thought, it's this, and maybe I'm wrong for most people, but this is what I believe. I want you to hold me accountable. If I'm in your area, I want you to hold me accountable. I'm not holding anybody
I'll
else.
hold you accountable, even though I'm not in your
Okay,
area.
good. Even better. No, but the reality, and who am I going to hold accountable? I'm going to hold accountable the people that I put policies forth for. So if I'm over HHS and I put forth a policy that says we are going to enact government oversight so that we can help the kids of DHHS, then I'm going to now hold DHHS accountable.
Mm-hmm.
I enacted that policy, even if I was a part of it by a sliver. I want to hold them accountable because I want to protect this great state that we live in. Okay, if I enact something that says, whatever about speeding, on a school street or whatever, right? Well, now I'm going to hold, the police stations accountable to be able to stop those people from doing that. Or maybe I'll hold the cities accountable for, having signs and postage for those. So my job as a state rep is also accountability. But from a public standpoint, I want you to hold me accountable to the things that I say. Mm-hmm. If I say that I'm going to do this thing and you support me and you help enact, get me in office and you give me your vote and trust, then that whole thing, it's accountability in its entirety. That's how the system actually works. But when you just blind trust people and then something goes wrong and somebody does something that you don't agree with, you can't then hold them accountable because you weren't part of the process.
Right.
You have to be there guiding them or at least being with them for every step so that you're truly holding that person accountable. It's a written contract without words. It's an understanding that I trust you and I will vote for you, and thus that's my written contract. That's me signing that paper or putting that circle on there for your name, that at the end of the day I get to hold you accountable.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think this is all really, really good stuff. And I think we do need to hold our people accountable. And, it's interesting is like, I would strongly encourage everybody to consider voting for Republicans largely up and down the ballot, right? Like there are a couple of cases where I would go for an independent. I think in all those cases I can think of, the independent is running against a Democrat. Mm-hmm. But I think that, however, what I would say is like, do some digging. Look at what all the candidates stand for. Look at their voting records. Look where they've voted on like some of these 80-20 issues. If they're already in office, are they voting in favor of what the people of their district want, or are they voting are they just cogs in the machine, and really are not doing their due diligence to ensure that they're doing what the people that elected them to represent them want? And if they're not, then should they be in office, right?
And go beyond that. Are they active in your community? And were they active before becoming a politician? I think that's huge. Like if there's somebody out there that was just getting the limelight after they became a politician, are they really active in your community? Were they really the right choice for that position? Because now they're a celebrity more than they are an actual policymaker. And look and see, are they writing policies? Are they writing good policies for your area? I know some people in certain cities that just go there to press a button. They don't actually write anything themselves. And that's not to say that you need to be the politician that writes policies, but understand that is a part of the role, right? Is that you are a policymaker. And if you're going there from an understanding that I'm just going to wait for the policies to come across your table, then are you really the voice of your city, the people that you represent? I think that your city has problems, right? Every city does. And are you reaching out to your mayors? Are you reaching out to your city councils? Are you reaching out to your small business owners, the people who help economically stimulate your areas? Are you reaching out to your universities, your colleges in your area? Ask them, their Chamber of Commerce's, ask them what issues are right now prominent, and let me help you through that, or let me put you in touch with somebody that can help you through that. That's the goal. That's the reality of that role, and that's their job. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's what we need. We need people who are serious about, doing what their people, what are the, listening to the needs of the community and bringing those and representing the people. That's, the term is representative, right? It's that you are there to be a representative of the people, not a representative of the party that you are affiliated with, or a representative of yourself, which is really difficult for just about everybody to understand, or representative of the people who helped support your finance your campaign, right? Like, obviously, like, there's a desire to do what they would want, but if what they want is in opposition to what the people want, or what's in opposition to what's in the best interest of the people, sometimes the people want things that are not good for them, and that there is a responsibility, I think, in that case, of the representative to effectively try to communicate why what said decision was made. However, I mean, if they don't agree with that, then they can hold you accountable at the ballot box, right? But I think that's it's interesting. You know, one of the things I was thinking about too, about like, what are we trying to get to? What is the Republic? And I just think that, like, when you look at the nation, the United States of America, especially you turn back the clock 40, 50, 60 years in terms of like the peace and safety, America has been headed down a path of less public safety and significant problems there. And I think that there is, again, when you talk about the culture and politics have a symbiotic relationship. The politics is currently, in my opinion, the way that it's being handled, especially under Democrat rule, is it's creating less public safety, where people feel less safe going out and doing what they want to do. And you know, I think of, and I still think of, you know, Maine, America, wherever, being so much safer than other parts of the world. But I think restoring that, people talk about, like, man, when I was kids, like, I left and mom wanted us gone until it was time to eat dinner. Like, I think there's an element of this. Now we have helicopter parents because everybody's so worried about things not being safe. And so part of what the Republican Party would like to bring to you is a world in which you can return to that, not defund the police like we sometimes hear from the Democrats. They haven't said it exactly like that. Now it's currently defund ICE, but you know, they had this rhetoric around defunding the police, and so that there's less crime because there's less people to police it and report it.
At the end of the day, they just want to get rid of everybody's guns too, and that doesn't help. Well, so like, if you're a police officer with guns, they're the first person that they can publicly attack for having a public gun out in the eye. And so, like, I think that doesn't help the situation. And, you know, if there was ever a world where we'd ever get rid of all of our guns, the police would be the last people to get rid of them. So, like, you know, so attacking them first makes zero sense. Right. So,
but I think it's more than that with that. There's like the people who are saying certain things that are being conditioned by the Democrat leadership to say certain things, and then there's the people who are actually in control. And I think the people in control know that if you can, you know, reduce the police, it makes more opportunity for some nefarious players to come in and be able to shift things in a direction that you want, right? If your goal is human flourishing, you wouldn't be arguing for defunding the police, right? You would be arguing for, man, if you look at America compared to the rest of the world, our police are pretty incredible. There are some bad apples, sure, but overall, it's actually generally like an exception that you find a bad apple. With all of the interactions, for instance, with ICE that they've had, there have been very few shootings in all reality. And some of those shootings, at the very least, have been deemed to be justified. And a couple of them may be questionable. We don't have video survey imagery of the one in Biddeford, so we don't necessarily know. There's more investigation that will come out. But we know that some of them have been deemed to be agreed upon by most people who are objective to be justified.
When you have a political party that
three that I can think of where ICE has had these fatal shootings. And as my point here, and I'll let you go, but talk on that. I mean, but is like, even if you wanted to argue that all three of those were unjustified, which I think would be an unjustified response, I think you still look at the really low number of issues that happen, considering the number of encounters, the millions of encounters, and you have 3 instances. It's still statistically incredibly low, even if it's a few more than that, right? And obviously we would not desire anybody to be killed at the hands of police, period. Like, that would be the objective. We don't want that. We want a society that's safe and people feel like they don't have to fear other people harming them, but also that they don't have to fear, like, in the event that there's a misunderstanding, the police harming them, whatever. That's not those scenarios necessarily, but like, the point here is, like, when you look at it, like, we're still so much safer, but these ideas of reducing police are things that, like, will make things less safe. And I highlight this just because, like being able to return to a world where people didn't have to worry about pedophiles around every corner and who might be doing something to their kid. Like, this is a scary world in which we currently live, and I think that there's a way to return. Like, if we put into place the right people in government, we can return to a society where we're not so incredibly afraid of all of the people that are doing harm, because we're actually handling those cases. We're through, like, actual accountability of crime in the areas of crime. We're actually doing a serious job of discouraging people from committing certain acts.
Sure.
And we're helping to rehabilitate. Like, that's not what we do today, but we're helping to rehabilitate, and we're seeking the rehabilitation of people who do commit certain crimes. Some crimes, I think, we don't. They're kind of, you do this, and we don't give you a second chance. But I think those are much more the rare thing than anything else. So anyway, so the point there is, like, a society where we don't have to fear as much that's where we want to go.
I think so. I mean, I think back to, like, 50s, where kids would be able to come home when the lights turn on, and they'd be able to go the stretch of 10 miles away or whatever, and it was like, it's not the end of the world. They're they're kids, and they're safe, and they're with other kids, and
now we have to fear the government.
Right.
There was a scenario where a mom let her kid do something, and it was like an older teen, and somebody threatened. Somebody called DHHS on them, and she was in danger of potentially losing her child for allowing her kid to go a short distance and go to the store, who was a teenager, right? Like, there's that fear as well that we don't want people to have to continue.
No, you're right, and but and what I think that's funny about this whole, like, political movement, right, is that. We're in Maine now, obviously, and this is like, I feel like we're pushing crazy ideologies across the board, and we're just not thinking about the fundamentals of any of it and where it comes from. A lot of the future seems to be trying to push socialism, which police are socialized. At the end of the day, I don't get a check that says, hey, protect me. So why are you trying to cut down on the one thing that's already basically socialized, right? Our fire departments, whatever, like, all these things. It's like, why defund them?
I reserve the right to not include them in being socialistic in any way. But continue.
No, but, like, the reality,
I hear your point. They're taxes where we collectively work together to pay for something. There is a government that's more government than a socialistic thing, I think. But go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. Just the reality of it is though, like, we want to get to a point where we feel like we can trust our government entities, and I think that comes from stopping the media from painting such an ugly picture. I think it comes down to we've lost the idea of what comply really means. These are people of authority. Used to be an annotation of when you get pulled over, you're already feared for your life, and, like, that, why? Like, you probably just had a taillight out. Like, right. Like, maybe he's giving you maybe like back when I was really young, they were doing, like, I don't know, give out like popsicles near your local school. So they'd pull the parents over and then hand them a popsicle and say, like, have a great day. We were just doing checks for like seatbelts or whatever, right? And it was like the coolest thing though at the time. And now they used to do sunglasses. They used to hand out a bunch of different things back in the day. But my point is though that like it's just it wasn't about like a gotcha moment, or it wasn't like we're bad guys, you're a bad guy just because you get pulled over. But now I feel like it's because of media. Ultimately, when somebody gets pulled over, even in your local area, what are the first thing people clamor to do? Get their phones out and start recording. And then that stuff goes on social media. And then it makes that person in a very, complex situation, the person who gets pulled over. It also makes that same situation go for the police officer. So we think of the police officer, I think a lot of times like robots, and they're just not people, but they are. And
most of them choose to serve because they want to do that. They want to serve.
They want to make the community a better place. And like the media has swayed that to be like, these guys just want to shoot people or they want to hurt people. And the reality is, like, have you ever had a conversation with your police officer?
That was Graham Plattner.
Yeah.
That's what he was doing in the military, right?
Yeah.
But he was their hero though, so I'm kind of confused.
Yeah. But that's the thing. It's like, have a conversation with them just as much as you want to hold we want to hold our elected officials accountable, right? Well, we need to be having those conversations with our firefighters and our police officers and our EMTs. Like, I know so many people that are the first to complain, but they haven't even had a single conversation with them. They don't even understand that. Oh, well, why are the police, trying to take this homeless guy away for being in this, downtown or whatever. And yet they don't see the full picture, which is that they've gone to that person multiple times, had long conversations of how can we help you? What do you need? And the person may turn them away or may feel like they're in a combative situation already. Right. But we, and I want to commend Waterville real quick here. Waterville does have very, very strong programs, especially, with Hope, which is, a wonderful program. We have strong officers that go out there and are trying to rehabilitate these people, and who are doing the right thing, just even beating the streets every day to make sure that our communities are safe. There's a reason that there are so few of people that are driving through at 100 miles an hour in a place that they shouldn't be. There's so few people that are, breaking into cars or breaking into houses. And we have a fairly decent squatting, we take care of the squatters in buildings, which was a really large issue in Waterville. So like because of our police force, because we have such a good police force, those issues are almost non-issues, and yeah, do things slip through the cracks? Are they human too? Absolutely. Just as much as when you order something at Walmart and you do the little drive-in thing and then you're like, these grapes are clearly spoiled. Are you going to go back in there and complain to that person? Probably not. Right. So then why are you complaining to your, police officers for just some spoiled grapes? Right. It's like, it's a non-issue. It's, right. Like just ignore those little small things that happen, or actually better yet, don't ignore it, but, hold them accountable to it, because at the end of the day, they probably just had a lot going on in that moment and needed to be reminded of whatever small issue was, but coming in with confrontation or anger, you're putting yourself in a confrontational point, right? Perspective. And then of course, they're a person of authority at the end of the day, and you have to respect that. And when you lose respect of that by instantly going in there with anger and violence, then you're going to get treated as a person that is in their way, a threat. So just keeping that in mind is important. So.
Yeah. Well, we've covered a lot of ground.
We have covered a lot. No, I don't think so. I mean, at the end of the day, I think there are a lot of people running for state rep, obviously, and for state senate. I advise everybody to do some research. Look at your candidates that you have across the board. Don't look at the Republican or Democrat-ness of them. Instead, What are they doing to impact your community? What are they doing to impact you? What are they trying to achieve for serving your community and you? And can you best align with them at the end of the day? They're candidates, okay? Even if they're an incumbent, they're a candidate. They can lose. And so think about that. It's not a win if they're an incumbent. Instead, I want you to more or less think, will this person have a conversation and hear me? Because that's literally their job, is to hear the concerns of the citizens that they represent and to be the voice for the state of Maine. And I just urge that rather than voting down party line, that people look into each of their candidates and actually discern for themselves who they believe is best for them.
Yeah, and I think if you do that honestly, and I think I'm going to kind of like put what their decisions would be in terms of policy. Like obviously from a moral ethic character standpoint, look at what they're doing within your community. But even if they are great people within your community, but their policies that they're either voting in favor of are destructive, to people's lives. They're damaging to the economy. Like don't let their behavior and them being nice people, for instance, and being involved in their community that way, get you to a place where you are going to let them slide on the fact that what they actually want to do is harmful to our society. But yeah, I would recommend do your research. I think you're going to have a hard time if you do that, honestly and objectively, especially if you look at the 80-20 issues and the most significant issues that are impacting our state, which is, I think, economics and and
power
and the power plays absolutely. I think you'll come to the conclusion that, like, even though, and I'm like, it's not all about party politics, but at the same time, like, what I want to communicate is, like, I would love it to be a place where, and this is why I get into a practice of doing your research, because hopefully we beat the Democrats so bad that they realize, man, we've got to adjust. We can't be on the wrong side of every 80-20 issue. And in 4 years, 2 years, whatever, maybe the Democrats have become a viable option. I honestly think it's not good, regardless of whether it's Democrat or Republican, for single party rule. That's not what the parties tend to be a counter for one another, to hold one another accountable, to go back to one of the things we've spent a lot of time talking about today. And so I recommend, doing your research. I think you're having a hard time at this point because the Democrats are on the wrong side of every major issue. You're going to have a hard time coming down and voting for them if you actually do your research. So I encourage you to do that and do it with an open mind. But that's what I would say about that. So thank you, Shawn, for running. It's not an easy thing to do, to put yourself out there, especially in a challenging race like you have, and in Waterville. And just thank you for the time, energy, effort you put into this. Your care and concern for your state, and just wish you well. If people want to be able to support you, like obviously you're running, you're a traditionally financed candidate. If you live in his district, you can vote for him. But if you don't live in his district, you can still help.
Yep.
Because you've got to raise some money.
I do, yeah. So you can go right on my site, Packard, Packard, and then FOR 64.com. And you can donate right on there, or reach out on Facebook. It's just Shawn Packard for State Representative, District 64. I'm pretty much all over at this point. Just looking to represent you and the people of Maine. So,
all right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks. Go ahead.
I was going to say, just hope to earn your vote in November. It's obviously, we just need young people to step up. So,
yeah, 100%. Well, thanks again. And thank you all for watching. As always, we'll be back on here later this week for episode 200, I believe, is what it's going to be, with gubernatorial candidate Robert Bobby Charles. So tune back in. I think it'll be Thursday evening. So, all right.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
Thanks.